There are moments in life that define us. Moments when the carefully constructed image others have of us shatters, revealing something far more powerful beneath the surface. For me, that moment came on a rainy Tuesday morning in Seattle's gleaming downtown district, sitting in Vertex Technologies' imposing glass and steel boardroom, watching Richard Kensington's smug smile fade into shocked disbelief. But let me back up a bit. Let me tell you how I went from being dismissed as just a housewife to becoming the owner of a $50 million tech company. It's a story about patience, strategy, and the sweet satisfaction of proving everyone wrong. Before I dive deeper into this story, I want to thank each one of you who've been supporting this journey of sharing stories about women reclaiming their power. If you're finding strength in these narratives of resilience and transformation, please consider subscribing. It's completely free, and it helps us reach more people who need to hear these stories. Now, let's get back to how I turned the tables on one of Seattle's most notorious tech bros. 6 months ago, I was sitting in my kitchen, going through my son Ollie's lunch schedule while my MBA degree collected dust in my home office. Don't get me wrong, I love being a mother. It's the most rewarding role I've ever had, but it's not my only identity. Something that Richard Kensington was about to learn the hard way. I had left my executive position at a Fortune 500 company when Ollie was born, choosing to focus on my family. My husband Marcus supported my decision, understanding that it was temporary. What he didn't know was that I'd been quietly building something on the side. While other parents were scrolling through social media during soccer practice, I was analyzing market trends and company valuations. The first time I encountered Richard Kensington was at a school fundraiser. He was there because his company, Vertex Technologies, was considering a generous donation to our children's STEM program. I introduced myself as a former marketing executive interested in his company's recent ventures. His response? A dismissive glance and a condescending smile as he asked if I could recommend a good cleaning service, since that must be my area of expertise now. That moment lit a fire in me. Not just anger, though there was plenty of that, but determination. You see, while Richard was busy underestimating every woman he met, I had been watching his company closely. Vertex Technologies had innovative products but terrible market penetration. Their leadership was living in the past, missing crucial shifts in the industry. And thanks to my friend Catherine Chen, who worked in financial analytics, I knew they were more vulnerable than they appeared. I began attending every school board meeting where Vertex was discussed, quietly gathering information. I learned their weaknesses, their blind spots, and most importantly, their value. Through Patricia Martinez, a frustrated mid-level manager at Vertex, I discovered that the company's board was divided, with several members looking to sell their shares. That's when my plan started taking shape. Years of managing household finances had taught me something invaluable: patience and precise budgeting. I had been investing smartly since my executive days, and with Marcus's successful medical practice, we had significant savings. Catherine helped me create Phoenix Ventures, a holding company that began quietly acquiring Vertex shares through various channels. The day Richard Kensington sealed his fate was during a board meeting where I was present as part of the school's fundraising committee. He was discussing Vertex's community initiatives, speaking about working mothers with that same condescending tone. When I raised a question about their market strategy, he cut me off. "Mrs. Blackwood," he said, his voice dripping with disdain, "these are complex business matters. Perhaps we should stick to discussing the bake sale. After all, you're just a housewife now, aren't you?" The room fell silent. A few board members shifted uncomfortably, but no one spoke up. I felt my heart pounding, but not from embarrassment, from anticipation. Because at that very moment, Catherine was finalizing the purchase of the last major block of shares we needed. I smiled, thinking about the certified letter already on its way to Vertex's legal department. "You're right, Richard," I said, standing up slowly. "I am a housewife. I'm also the person who just bought controlling interest in your company." The story I'm about to tell you isn't just about revenge. It's about reminding the world that women don't cease to exist as professionals, as innovators, or as leaders just because they choose to prioritize family for a while. It's about proving that underestimating someone based on their current role is not just short-sighted, it's bad business. If you're ready to hear how this story unfolds, make sure you've subscribed and hit that notification bell. Because what happened next in that boardroom changed not just my life, but the lives of every underestimated person at Vertex Technologies. Sometimes the greatest power lies in being underestimated. And Richard Kensington? He was about to learn that lesson in the most expensive way possible. The silence in the boardroom felt electric. Richard Kensington's face had turned an interesting shade of crimson, and I could practically see the wheels turning in his head as he tried to process what I'd just said. But I wasn't done. Not by a long shot. The letter in my bag, freshly delivered from my attorneys, was about to change everything. I remember thinking about how far I'd come from those early days of plotting this takeover. Every morning, while preparing Ollie's breakfast and packing his lunch, I'd been meticulously building a network of allies within Vertex Technologies. Patricia Martinez had been instrumental, feeding me information about the company's internal struggles that never made it to the shareholders' reports. The board members shifted uncomfortably in their leather chairs as I pulled out the documentation. Several of them had sold their shares to my holding company, Phoenix Ventures, never realizing who was behind the purchase. I had kept my identity, hidden through a complex web of legal entities, a strategy Catherine Chen had helped me perfect over countless late-night planning sessions. "I believe," I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart, "we should discuss the future of Vertex Technologies." I placed the papers on the gleaming mahogany table, sliding them toward Richard. "As the majority shareholder, I have some concerns about our current direction." Richard's hand trembled slightly as he reached for the documents. His usual swagger had evaporated, replaced by a barely concealed panic. "This is impossible," he sputtered, flipping through the pages. "You can't. You're not qualified to—" "My MBA from Wharton and 15 years of executive experience suggest otherwise," I interrupted, my tone pleasant but firm. "Not to mention the fact that I've managed to acquire controlling interest in your company right under your nose. Would you like to discuss qualifications further, Richard?" The other board members were now openly staring at their phones, frantically verifying what I'd just revealed. I could see the moment it hit them. Their stock alerts lighting up as the news began to spread. Phoenix Ventures had just become the majority shareholder of Vertex Technologies. Catherine chose that moment to walk into the boardroom, her timing impeccable as always. As my financial advisor and the architect of this acquisition, she had earned her place at this table. The click of her heels on the marble floor punctuated the tense silence. Mrs. Blackwood, one of the older board members, James Morton, cleared his throat. "Perhaps we should discuss this privately." He threw a nervous glance at Richard, who was still staring at the papers in disbelief. "I think we're past the need for private discussions," I replied, taking my seat at the head of the table. Richard's usual spot. Vertex Technologies has been underperforming for the past 3 quarters. Our market share is slipping, our innovation pipeline is stagnant, and employee satisfaction is at an all-time low. These are all issues that need to be addressed immediately. Patricia Martinez, sitting quietly in the corner taking minutes, couldn't quite hide her smile. She had witnessed firsthand how Richard's leadership style had demoralized the workforce, particularly the women in technical positions. The company's turnover rate for female engineers was twice the industry average, a statistic I planned to change. "You can't just walk in here and take over." Richard finally found his voice, though it lacked its usual authority. "The board won't stand for it." "Actually," Catherine interjected, opening her laptop. According to the company bylaws and Mrs. Blackwood's controlling interest, that's exactly what she can do. She projected a series of graphs onto the wall screen, showing the steady accumulation of shares by Phoenix Ventures over the past year. The beautiful irony wasn't lost on anyone in the room. While Richard had been dismissing me as just a housewife, I had been systematically acquiring his company. Every condescending remark, every dismissive gesture had only made me more determined to succeed. I pulled out another document from my briefcase, my first act as majority shareholder. "I'm calling for an immediate vote of no confidence in the current CEO," I announced, my voice carrying across the stunned boardroom. Unless, of course, Mr. Kensington would prefer to resign. Richard's face had now progressed from red to an alarming shade of purple. "You cannot be serious," he spluttered. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. This is corporate terrorism." "No, Richard," I corrected him calmly. "This is business. Something you should understand, given how fond you are of reminding everyone of your Harvard Business School credentials." I turned to address the entire board. "I've prepared a comprehensive plan for Vertex's restructuring, including strategies to improve our market position and workplace culture." Catherine began distributing tablets containing my proposal to each board member. I had spent months crafting this plan, working on it during soccer practices, piano lessons, and late into the night after Ollie was asleep. It detailed everything from product development strategies to employee retention initiatives. As the board members scrolled through the document, I could see their expressions changing. My plan wasn't just about revenge, it was about transforming Vertex into the company it could have been if it hadn't been held back by outdated thinking and toxic leadership. "This is quite impressive," James Morton admitted, looking up from his tablet, "particularly the proposed AI integration for our security products." "Thank you," I replied, allowing myself a small smile. "I've had a lot of time to think about it while attending those bake sales Richard mentioned." The room grew quiet again as the implications of what was happening sank in. Richard Kensington, the man who had built his reputation on dismissing and underestimating women, was about to be ousted by someone he had repeatedly dismissed as just a housewife. But this moment wasn't just about Richard or me. It was about every woman who had ever been talked over in a meeting, every parent who had been passed over for promotion because they had family commitments, every person who had been judged by their current role rather than their capabilities. As I sat there, watching Richard's empire crumble around him, I thought about all the times I had wanted to speak up, but held my tongue. All the times I had swallowed my anger at his casual sexism and condescension. Now, finally, I had found my voice, and I intended to use it to create real change. The next morning dawned bright and clear over Seattle's skyline. News of the Vertex Technologies takeover had spread like wildfire through the tech community, and my phone hadn't stopped buzzing since I'd left the boardroom. Media outlets were clamoring for interviews, industry analysts were speculating about the company's future, and my LinkedIn profile had exploded with connection requests. Sitting at my kitchen island, sipping my morning coffee, I reflected on how surreal it all felt. Ollie was munching on his cereal, blissfully unaware that his mother had just become one of the most talked about figures in Seattle's tech scene. Marcus reached over and squeezed my hand, his eyes filled with pride and a hint of amazement. "I still can't believe you pulled this off without telling me," he said, shaking his head with a smile. "All those book club meetings with Catherine. I couldn't risk anyone finding out," I explained, returning his smile. "Though I have to admit, keeping it from you was the hardest part." I glanced at my phone as another notification lit up the screen. Looks like Richard's been busy. His PR team just released a statement. The statement was exactly what I'd expected, carefully worded corporate speak about mutual decisions and pursuing other opportunities. But the tech blogs were telling a different story, with headlines screaming about the housewife who had orchestrated one of the most surprising takeovers in recent Seattle tech history. Patricia Martinez arrived at my house just as Marcus was leaving for his hospital rounds. She'd brought with her a thick folder of internal documents and employee surveys that had never made it to the board. As we spread them across my dining room table, the true extent of Vertex's problems became even clearer. The engineering team has been sitting on some incredible innovations, Patricia explained, pointing to several project proposals. But Richard kept shutting them down because they came from the female engineers. He claimed they were too risky or not market-ready. I picked up one particularly interesting proposal for an AI-driven cybersecurity system. The engineer who designed it had left 6 months ago to join a competitor. "Get in touch with her," I instructed Patricia. "Let her know things are changing at Vertex. We'd love to have her back." Catherine arrived next, armed with her laptop and a stack of financial reports. We had work to do before the emergency board meeting I'd called for the afternoon. "The market's responding well to the news," she said, pulling up the morning's trading data. "Our stock is up 12% since the announcement." As we worked, I couldn't help but think about all the times Richard had made comments about women being too emotional for business decisions. Yet here we were, 3 women calmly and methodically planning the restructuring of a major tech company while juggling our other responsibilities. My phone buzzed again. A message from James Morton. "Eleanor, I've been going through your proposal in detail. The board is impressed, but Richard's threatening legal action claims the acquisition wasn't transparent." I smiled, remembering how Catherine and I had meticulously documented every step of the acquisition process. "Send the threats to our legal team," I replied. "Everything was done by the book. Richard's just upset because he didn't see it coming." Around noon, I took a break to prepare lunch for Ollie, who was home for a teacher workday. As I made his favorite grilled cheese sandwich, he looked up from his tablet. "Mom, why are there pictures of you on the internet?" I sat down beside him, trying to find the right words to explain. "Remember how we talked about standing up to bullies?" He nodded. "Well, sometimes bullies can be grown-ups too, and sometimes the best way to stand up to them is to be smarter and work harder than they expect you to." The afternoon board meeting was scheduled for 3 o'clock. I chose my outfit carefully, the same outfit I'd worn the day Richard had dismissed me at the fundraiser. A subtle reminder of how badly he'd misjudged the situation. Before leaving, I hugged Ollie tightly. "Be good for Mrs. Thompson," I told him, grateful that our longtime sitter was available on short notice. "Mommy's going to go make some changes." The Vertex Technologies building looked different now. As I walked through the lobby, I noticed employees trying to catch a glimpse of me, whispering among themselves. The security guard who had previously barely acknowledged me now stood up straight and nodded respectfully. In the elevator, Patricia briefed me on the latest developments. Several key engineers had already reached out, expressing their excitement about the change in leadership. There was an energy in the building that hadn't been there before, a sense of possibility. The boardroom was packed when I arrived. Every board member was present, along with the company's top executives and legal team. Richard sat in a corner, his usual bravado replaced by barely contained fury. His lawyer whispered something in his ear, but he waved him off impatiently. As I took my place at the head of the table, I could feel the weight of everyone's expectations. They were all wondering the same thing. Was I really capable of running this company, or was this just an elaborate act of revenge? "Before we begin," I said, my voice clear and steady, "I want to address the elephant in the room. Yes, I'm a mother. Yes, I've spent the last few years focusing on my family. And yes, I just orchestrated the acquisition of this company. These facts are not mutually exclusive. In fact, managing a household and raising a child have taught me more about efficiency, multitasking, and crisis management than any business school ever could. The energy in the Vertex Technologies boardroom shifted perceptibly as I laid out my vision for the company's future. Opening my laptop, I projected a series of carefully prepared slides onto the wall screen, each one detailing specific changes and initiatives that would transform our corporate culture and market position. Our first priority, I announced, gesturing to a graph showing employee retention rates, is addressing the exodus of talent that's been bleeding our company dry. In the past year alone, we've lost 38% of our female engineers and 22% of our minority employees. That stops today. From his corner seat, Richard muttered something under his breath. I caught the words, diversity, quota, and chose to address it head-on. This isn't about quotas, Mr. Kensington. It's about basic business sense. When we dismiss or drive away talented individuals based on gender, race, or family status, we're literally throwing away our competitive advantage. Catherine stepped forward, presenting the financial implications of our current turnover rate. The numbers were staggering. Millions spent on recruiting and training, only to lose valuable employees within their first 2 years. Several board members leaned forward, their expressions shifting from skepticism to concern. Furthermore, I continued, switching to the next slide, I've reviewed the rejected project proposals from the past 18 months. We've passed on at least 3 innovations that our competitors have since developed successfully. One of those projects initially proposed by our own team is now generating over $50 million in annual revenue for our biggest rival. The room grew uncomfortably quiet. These were facts that couldn't be dismissed with condescending remarks or bureaucratic excuses. I noticed James Morton shooting a pointed look at Richard, who was now staring intently at his phone, his jaw clenched. Patricia Martinez stood up next, distributing tablets containing our new organizational structure. We're flattening the hierarchy, she explained. Project teams will be autonomous, with leaders chosen based on expertise rather than seniority. We're also implementing flexible working hours and expanding our parental leave policies. This is absurd, Richard finally exploded, slamming his hand on the table. You're going to destroy everything we've built with these progressive fantasies. I met his gaze steadily. What we've built, Richard, is a company that's falling behind its competitors, losing its best talent, and fostering a culture of fear and discrimination. The fantasy was believing that this approach could succeed in today's market. Opening another document, I revealed the results of our latest employee satisfaction survey, data that Richard had deliberately kept from the board. The numbers were damning. Morale was at an all-time low, with 65% of employees actively looking for other opportunities. But here's the good news, I said, my voice softening. We have everything we need to turn this around. The talent, the infrastructure, the market position. It's all here. We just need to stop standing in our own way. The next hour was devoted to detailed discussions of our new initiatives. We would be establishing a mentorship program, revamping our product development pipeline, and creating a dedicated innovation lab where employees could pursue promising projects without bureaucratic interference. As we delved into the specifics, I could see the excitement building among the board members. Even those who had initially seemed skeptical were now actively engaged, offering suggestions and insights. This was no longer about the housewife who bought a company. It was about saving and transforming a business that had lost its way. Catherine presented our financial projections, showing how our proposed changes would affect the bottom line. The initial investment would be significant, but the potential returns were compelling. By reducing turnover, fostering innovation, and improving our company culture, we stood to increase our market share substantially within the first year. "There's one more thing," I said as the presentation drew to a close. "Effective immediately, we're establishing an employee stock ownership program. Every full-time employee will receive shares in the company with additional grants based on performance and innovation." This announcement caused a stir. Employee ownership was relatively rare in our industry, but I had seen its power firsthand in my previous executive role. When employees have a real stake in the company's success, their engagement and creativity flourish. "You can't just give away company shares," Richard protested, but his objection sounded weak even to his own ears. "Actually, we can," Catherine interjected. "The board has the authority to establish such a program, and as majority shareholder, Mrs. Blackwood's vote carries the motion." Looking around the room, I saw heads nodding. The old guard was giving way to new ideas, and even those who had initially resisted change were beginning to see its necessity. The tech industry was evolving, and Vertex Technologies would either evolve with it or be left behind. "I understand this is a lot of change to process," I acknowledged, closing my laptop. "But I want to be clear about something. These aren't just feel-good initiatives or PR moves. This is about building a stronger, more competitive, more profitable company. Because diverse teams make better decisions. Satisfied employees do better work, and companies that adapt to change survive, while those that resist it become cautionary tales." As the meeting drew to a close, board members began gathering their things. Several approached me with questions and suggestions, their initial skepticism replaced by cautious optimism. Richard remained in his corner, his face a mask of barely contained rage, but he was no longer the center of attention. The future of Vertex Technologies was taking shape, and it looked nothing like its past. Patricia caught my eye from across the room and gave me a subtle thumbs up. She had already begun coordinating with HR to implement our new policies, and tomorrow morning, every employee would receive a detailed email outlining the changes ahead. I gathered my materials, thinking about how I needed to get home in time for Ollie's bedtime story. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but for now, I had taken the first steps toward proving that being just a housewife had taught me more about leadership than Richard Kensington had learned in his entire career. The morning after the board meeting, I arrived at Vertex Technologies early, before the usual rush of employees. The security guard, Mike, greeted me with a warm smile and handed me my new access card. The weight of it in my hand felt significant, a small plastic rectangle that represented such enormous change. Walking through the quiet halls, I took in details I'd never noticed during my previous visits. The stark, impersonal artwork on the walls, the rigid arrangement of the cubicles, the complete absence of collaborative spaces. Everything screamed outdated corporate culture, and it all needed to change. In my new office, formerly Richard's, I found Patricia already, waiting with a stack of personnel files and a large coffee. "The emails went out at 6 a.m., she reported, her eyes bright with excitement. "My inbox is already flooding with responses from employees. They can hardly believe it's real." I settled behind the desk, noting how Richard had positioned it to tower over visitors, a subtle power play that would be one of the first things to go. "What's the overall tone of the responses?" I asked, pulling up my own email. "Overwhelmingly positive," Patricia replied, handing me a preliminary analysis. "Though there's some anxiety, especially among middle management. They're worried about the restructuring." As if on cue, my phone buzzed with a message from Catherine. She'd been monitoring the market's reaction to our announcements. Our stock had jumped another 8% in pre-market trading, and industry analysts were starting to release their first takes on our new direction. By 9 a.m., The office was humming with energy. I could hear snippets of excited conversation floating past my door, which I'd deliberately left open, another departure from Richard's closed-door policy. The engineering team was particularly animated, already forming groups to discuss previously shelved projects. Sarah Chen, one of our senior engineers who'd been on the verge of leaving, poked her head into my office. "Mrs. Blackwood, do you have a moment?" Her expression was cautiously hopeful as she clutched a familiar-looking folder, the proposal Richard had dismissed 6 months ago. "Eleanor, please," I said, gesturing to a chair. "And yes, I'd love to hear about your quantum encryption project. The one that Richard said was too ambitious for our current focus?" Sarah's eyes widened in surprise. "You know about that?" "I make it my business to know about potentially game-changing innovations," I replied, clearing space on my desk for her materials, especially when they come from our best minds. For the next hour, Sarah walked me through her proposal. It was brilliant, exactly the kind of forward-thinking technology that could put Vertex years ahead of our competitors. As she spoke, her initial nervousness gave way to genuine enthusiasm, and I could see the spark that Richard had so carelessly tried to extinguish. "When can you start assembling your team?" I asked as she finished her presentation. Sarah blinked. "You mean you're approving it? Just like that?" "The proposal is solid, the market potential is clear, and you're clearly the right person to lead it," I stated. "What else would I need to know?" Around 11, James Morton appeared at my door. The older board member looked slightly uncomfortable, but determined. "Eleanor, got a minute? Some of us have been talking about Richard." I gestured for him to come in and close the door. "What's he planning?" "He's been reaching out to major shareholders, trying to build opposition to your changes. Claims you're going to destroy the company's value with all this progressive nonsense, as he puts it." I nodded, unsurprised. "And how are shareholders responding?" James actually smiled. "Not quite the way he hoped. Turns out many of them have daughters in tech. They're quite interested in your vision for a more inclusive industry." Throughout the day, I met with department heads, team leaders, and individual employees. Each conversation revealed both the deep-seated problems Richard had created and the incredible potential he had suppressed. By late afternoon, my notebook was filled with ideas, suggestions, and concerns that would help shape our transformation. Catherine arrived around 4 with the latest market analysis and an unexpected piece of news. 3 major tech blogs want to interview you, she announced. They're calling you the Housewife CEO, though not in the way Richard meant it. You're becoming something of a symbol. I thought about that as I packed up for the day. I hadn't set out to become a symbol of anything. I'd simply wanted to prove that being a mother and managing a home didn't make me any less capable of running a company. But if my story could inspire other underestimated women to reclaim their power, I was ready to embrace that role. Marcus called as I was leaving the office. "Ollie's been telling everyone at school that his mom's a superhero," he said, laughter in his voice. "Apparently, you've been fighting bad guys who don't believe in girls." That night, as I tucked Ollie into bed, he asked me if I was still going to be able to come to his soccer games now that I was running a company. I promised him that some things would never change, including our Saturday morning pancake, tradition, and my presence at every important moment in his life, because that was the other message I wanted to send. Women shouldn't have to choose between being mothers and being leaders. We could be both, and being good at one role could make us better at the other. As I sat in my home office later, reviewing reports and preparing for the next day, I reflected on how much had changed in such a short time. Richard had thought he was insulting me by calling me just a housewife, but he'd actually given me my greatest advantage. Being underestimated had allowed me to work quietly, strategically, and effectively to create real change. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but for now, I was exactly where I needed to be, proving that sometimes the most powerful person in the room is the one everyone else has dismissed. The winds of change blew through Vertex Technologies with unexpected force. Within a week of my takeover, the office atmosphere had transformed dramatically. The previously sterile break room now buzzed with animated conversations as employees from different departments mingled freely, sharing ideas that would have been silenced under Richard's leadership. My morning started with an unexpected visit from Notorious, our head of human resources. She carried a thick folder of employee feedback forms, her face glowing with an enthusiasm I'd never seen before. "You need to see these," she said, spreading the papers across my desk. "We've had more innovative suggestions in the past week than in the entire previous year." The feedback wasn't just about technical innovations. Employees were proposing everything from sustainable office practices to mental health initiatives. One junior developer had drafted a comprehensive plan for an on-site childcare facility, something I'd been privately considering but hadn't yet proposed. Catherine arrived for our daily financial briefing, looking particularly pleased. "The market's loving us," she announced, pulling up the latest figures. 3 major investment firms have upgraded their recommendations for Vertex stock. They're calling us a pioneer in corporate culture transformation. As we reviewed the numbers, Patricia interrupted with urgent news. "Richard's making moves," she said, closing the door behind her. "He's scheduled a lunch meeting with Andrew Porter from Tech Vanguard." Tech Vanguard was our biggest competitor, and Andrew Porter was known for hostile takeovers. The implications were clear. Richard was trying to orchestrate a counterattack, but his desperation only confirmed that we were moving in the right direction. I spent the afternoon in the engineering department, sitting in on project presentations that had previously been relegated to email attachments under Richard's efficiency protocols. Sarah Chen's quantum encryption team had made remarkable progress, their excitement palpable as they walked me through their latest breakthrough. During a brief break, I stepped out to call Marcus. He'd been holding down the fort at home, managing Ollie's schedule while I navigated these crucial first weeks. "How's the science fair project coming along?" I asked, thinking about the volcano model we'd started last weekend. "Actually," Marcus replied, "Ollie's changed his mind. He wants to do something about computers now. Says he wants to be like Mom." The pride in his voice made my heart swell. Back in the office, I found James. Morton waiting with concerning news. "Richard's been meeting with old guard shareholders," he reported, "trying to paint your changes as reckless and financially irresponsible." I pulled up our latest performance metrics. "Send them these," I instructed. "Show them how our employee retention rate has improved 30% in just 1 week. Show them the surge in patent applications from our engineering teams. Show them the market response to our new direction." Late afternoon brought an unexpected visitor, Claire Davidson, CEO of Infomatrix, one of Seattle's fastest-growing startups. She'd heard about our transformation and wanted to discuss potential collaboration opportunities. As we talked, I noticed her glancing at the family photo on my desk. "You know," she said thoughtfully, "I've been hiding the fact that I'm a mother of 3. Worried it would make me seem less committed to the business." She gestured at my office, where Ollie's artwork hung proudly alongside our company's achievement certificates. "But you're proving that being a mother and a CEO aren't mutually exclusive." That evening, I had a video call scheduled with our international teams. As I prepared for the call, Patricia brought me a concerning email. Richard had apparently been spreading rumors about my qualifications, suggesting that I'd been out of the industry too long to understand modern tech developments. I smiled, thinking about all the late nights I'd spent studying industry trends, while everyone thought I was just a housewife watching Netflix. Richard had never bothered to ask what I did with my time. He'd simply assumed I'd stepped away from the professional world completely. The video call revealed another unexpected benefit of our new leadership style. Our teams in Asia had been hesitant to voice concerns under Richard's management, worried about appearing confrontational. Now, they openly shared challenges and suggestions, leading to breakthrough solutions for long-standing issues. After the call, I found an email from Sarah Chen that made me pause. She'd attached photos from that day's engineering team lunch, where they'd spontaneously started a mentorship program for junior developers. The photos showed animated discussions, shared laptops, and genuine collaboration. Exactly the culture we'd been trying to build. I was about to head home when Linda Torres reappeared with urgent news. An anonymous employee survey had revealed that Richard had been running a shadow communication network, trying to undermine our new initiatives. But instead of causing concern, the revelation brought unexpected relief. Employees were reporting these attempts rather than hiding them. Driving home, I reflected on how Richard's attempts to discredit me were having the opposite effect. Every attack only served to highlight the positive changes we'd implemented. His resistance was becoming our strength, unifying the company in ways I hadn't anticipated. At home, I found Ollie still awake, working on a drawing. "It's you, Mom," he explained, showing me his artwork. "Fighting the bad guys at work." The picture showed a superhero figure in a business suit, surrounded by colorful stars that he told me represented all the good ideas you let people have. Later that night, as I reviewed proposals for next week's board meeting, Marcus brought me a cup of tea and sat down beside me. "You know what's amazing?" he said. "You're not just changing a company, you're changing how an entire industry thinks about leadership." The next morning would bring new challenges. Richard's meeting with Tech Vanguard's Porter loomed on the horizon, and we had yet to announce several major initiatives that would further shake up the status quo. But as I prepared for bed, I felt a deep sense of satisfaction. We were proving that compassionate leadership wasn't just morally right, it was good business. And somewhere across town, Richard Kensington was learning a valuable lesson. Never underestimate a housewife who understands both balance sheets and bedtime stories. Seattle's tech scene was buzzing with rumors of Richard's lunch meeting with Andrew Porter from Tech Vanguard. The city's upscale restaurants had become stages for corporate theater, where power plays unfolded over expertly plated meals and carefully chosen wines. But while Richard plotted his counterattack, I was implementing changes that would make Vertex Technologies virtually takeover-proof. My morning began with an emergency call from Catherine, who had caught wind of something interesting. "You need to see this," she said, forwarding an email chain that had been leaked to her. The correspondence between Richard and Porter revealed more than just takeover plans. It exposed a fundamental misunderstanding of Vertex's new value proposition. In my office, Patricia brought in the latest employee engagement metrics. The numbers told a compelling story. Project completion rates had increased by 40%, while overtime hours had actually decreased. Teams were working smarter, not harder, freed from the bureaucratic constraints that had previously stifled their creativity. Sarah Chen burst into my office, her usual composure replaced by barely contained excitement. "The quantum encryption? Prototype," she exclaimed. "It's working. We've achieved breakthrough results months ahead of schedule." She spread the test results across my desk, pointing out key performance indicators that exceeded even our most optimistic projections. While Sarah walked me through the technical details, Linda Torres arrived with another stack of resumes. Word had spread about our cultural transformation, and top talent from competing firms was practically beating down our doors. Among them were several former Vertex employees who had left during Richard's tenure, now eager to return. The afternoon brought an unexpected visit from James Morton, looking more troubled than usual. "Porter's making moves," he reported. "They're preparing a tender offer for outstanding shares at a premium." He paused, studying my reaction. Richard's been giving them insider information about our vulnerabilities. I couldn't help but smile at the irony. The vulnerabilities Richard was so eager to expose were based on his outdated understanding of the company. He was playing checkers while we were playing chess, still fighting the last war while we'd already moved on to the next battlefield. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Ollie's school called. He gave a presentation about modern business leadership, using you as his example. The principal wants to talk to you about speaking at Career Day. The message brought tears to my eyes. Not just because of Ollie's pride in my work, but because it represented exactly the kind of change we were trying to create in the corporate world. Catherine arrived with our counter-strategy to Porter's potential tender offer. We'd been preparing for this, quietly building alliances with institutional investors who appreciated our vision for long-term value creation over short-term profit maximization. The presentation she'd prepared for them was brilliant, highlighting how our new initiatives were already delivering measurable results. A knock on my office door revealed Claire Davidson from Infomatrix again, this time with an intriguing proposal. "We've been watching what you're doing at Vertex," she said, settling into a chair. "Your approach to integrating family-friendly policies with cutting-edge innovation, it's exactly what the industry needs. We want to form a coalition of tech companies committed to these principles." As we discussed the possibilities, Patricia interrupted with breaking news. One of Richard's closest allies on the board had just publicly announced his support for our new direction. The statement praised our bold vision for the future of tech leadership and explicitly rejected any attempt to return to the old way of doing things. The afternoon board meeting was electric with tension. Richard attended virtually, his face a mask of barely contained fury as we presented the latest performance metrics. Our stock price had surged another 15%, employee. Retention was at an all-time high, and our innovation pipeline was overflowing with promising projects. "This is unsustainable," Richard argued, his voice tight with frustration. "You're sacrificing profitability for feel-good policies." I pulled up the next slide, which showed our profit margins actually increasing despite our investments in employee programs. "The numbers suggest otherwise," I replied calmly. "It turns out that happy, empowered employees are good for the bottom line. Who knew?" After the meeting, I took a walk through the engineering department. The transformation was visible everywhere. Walls that once separated teams had been replaced with collaborative spaces. Whiteboards were filled with innovative ideas, and the energy was palpable. This wasn't just a workplace anymore. It was an innovation ecosystem. Sarah Chen caught up with me, tablet in hand. "We've had 3 major breakthroughs this week alone," she reported excitedly. "The team's working on things we never would have attempted under the old management. And you know what's really amazing? Some of our best ideas are coming from the junior engineers, the ones who were too intimidated to speak up before." Back in my office, I found an email from Andrew Porter himself. The subject line read, "Meeting request, confidential." Inside was a carefully worded message suggesting that perhaps we could find common ground to discuss the future of both our companies. It was a thinly veiled attempt to feel out our defenses, but it also revealed something crucial. They were worried. As the day drew to a close, Patricia brought in one final piece of news. The tech blog that had first dubbed me the Housewife CEO had published a follow-up piece titled, "The Future of Tech Leadership: How One Woman's Vision is Reshaping Corporate Culture." The article had gone viral, sparking a nationwide conversation about the relationship between family life and executive leadership. Driving home, I reflected on how Richard's attempt to diminish me by calling me just a housewife had backfired so spectacularly. He had assumed that my time away from the corporate world had made me weak, when in reality it had given me exactly the perspective and skills needed to transform Vertex into something extraordinary. That evening, as I helped Ollie with his homework, he asked me what I'd done at work today. I helped make sure that when you grow up, I told him, you'll never have to choose between being successful and being kind. He considered this for a moment, then nodded sagely. That's good, he said, because I want to be both. Dawn broke over Seattle as I prepared for what would prove to be a pivotal day at Vertex Technologies. Andrew Porter's meeting request hadn't been idle courtesy. Tech Vanguard was making their move, and we needed to be ready. The stakes weren't just financial anymore. We were fighting for the soul of corporate culture itself. Catherine arrived at my house earlier than usual, armed with fresh market analyses and a determined gleam in her eye. Over coffee at my kitchen table, she laid out the intelligence she'd gathered through her network. Porter's board is split, she revealed. Half of them see our success as a threat. The other half wants to emulate our model. Marcus, passing through on his way to the hospital, squeezed my shoulder supportively. Show them what a real leader looks like, he whispered, dropping a kiss on my head. Ollie, still in his pajamas, presented me with a hand-drawn good luck card featuring a stick figure in a business suit standing atop what appeared to be a mountain of computers. The Vertex office was already humming when I arrived. Word of Porter's interest had leaked, and the atmosphere crackled with nervous energy. Patricia met me at the elevator with an update that made me smile. 3 more of Richard's longtime allies had withdrawn their support for his counteroffensive. Sarah Chen intercepted me before I could reach my office. We need to show you something, she said urgently, leading me to the innovation lab. Her team had worked through the night, achieving a breakthrough that would make our quantum encryption technology virtually impossible to replicate. The timing couldn't have been better. In my office, Linda Torres waited with a thick folder of recruitment data. Top talent wasn't just trickling in anymore, it was flooding. Industry veterans were offering to take pay cuts just to be part of what we were building. More telling were the notes they attached to their applications, expressing enthusiasm for our family-friendly policies and collaborative culture. James Morton appeared mid-morning, looking both worried and amused. Porter's here, he announced. But he's not alone. Richard's with him. The 2 men were waiting in the main conference room, no doubt expecting to find me intimidated by their impromptu arrival. Instead, they found me perfectly prepared. I'd anticipated this move, Richard's attempt to catch me off guard, to demonstrate his superior business acumen to Porter. But the conference room they entered wasn't the stark, traditional space they remembered. The walls displayed real-time data visualization of our latest innovations, employee satisfaction metrics, and market performance indicators. Porter spoke first, his practiced corporate smile not quite reaching his eyes. Eleanor, he began, using my first name with calculated familiarity, your achievements here are impressive, but we believe Tech Vanguard could offer Vertex's shareholders significant value through a strategic merger. I let his words hang in the air for a moment, noting how Richard leaned forward eagerly. Then I activated the presentation Catherine and I had prepared. Before we discuss Tech Vanguard's interest, I replied, let me show you exactly what you'd be trying to acquire. The next hour was a masterclass in corporate strategy. I walked them through our innovation pipeline, our talent acquisition successes, and our market penetration metrics. But more importantly, I showed them something they couldn't replicate. Through a hostile takeover, the cultural transformation that was driving our success. Live feeds from various departments showed teams collaborating across traditional boundaries. The on-site childcare center we'd just announced was already oversubscribed, with a waiting list of potential employees attracted by our family-first policies. Our patent applications had tripled, and employee turnover had plummeted to industry-leading lows. Richard's face grew increasingly red as I continued. This wasn't the vulnerable company he'd promised Porter. This was a revolutionary force in the tech industry, driven by principles he'd dismissed as progressive fantasies. Porter's expression, however, had shifted from polite condescension to genuine interest. When I finished, he turned to Richard with a look that spoke volumes. "You didn't mention any of this," he said quietly. Then to me, "Would you be interested in discussing a different kind of partnership? One that preserves Vertex's autonomy and leadership?" Before I could respond, Patricia burst into the room. "Sorry to interrupt," she said, not sounding sorry at all. "But the governor's office is on the line. They want to discuss making Vertex's family-friendly policies a model for statewide corporate standards." The timing was perfect, though entirely unplanned. Porter's eyebrows shot up, while Richard seemed to deflate visibly. The power dynamic had shifted completely, and everyone in the room knew it. Tech Vanguard hadn't come to rescue a struggling company. They'd come to learn from an industry leader. I spent the rest of the morning in detailed discussions with Porter, outlining potential areas for collaboration that would benefit both companies without compromising our independence. Richard sat silently, watching his last hope of regaining control evaporate. As they prepared to leave, Porter paused in the doorway. "I owe you an apology," he said quietly. "I came here expecting to find a company weakened by unconventional leadership. Instead, I found the future of our industry." The afternoon brought a flurry of activity as news of the meeting spread. Our stock price surged again as market analysts upgraded their projections. More importantly, messages poured in from tech companies across the country, asking about our policies and practices. Sarah Chen's team chose that moment to announce another breakthrough, this one even more significant than the last. In the celebration that followed, I watched Richard slip away, finally understanding that his vision of corporate leadership, based on hierarchy, control, and exclusion, was obsolete. That evening, as I shared the day's events with Marcus and Ollie over dinner, my phone buzzed with a message from Claire Davidson. The coalition of family-friendly tech companies was growing, and they wanted me to chair the steering committee. "You're not just running a company anymore," she wrote. "You're leading a movement." Looking at my family, I realized she was right. This wasn't just about proving Richard wrong or saving one company. It was about showing that success in business doesn't require sacrificing our humanity. In fact, embracing our full selves, including our roles as parents and caregivers, makes us stronger leaders. News of Porter's visit and its unexpected outcome spread through Seattle's tech community like wildfire. The story had evolved far beyond a simple corporate takeover attempt. It had become a referendum on the future of leadership in the industry. My inbox flooded with messages from executives, entrepreneurs, and most touchingly, parents trying to balance their professional ambitions with family life. The morning started with an unexpected visit from Victoria Chang, editor-in-chief of Tech Future magazine. She'd arrived unannounced, hoping to document what she called the Vertex revolution firsthand. As we walked through the office, she observed the changes with keen interest. The collaborative spaces, the diverse teams, the energy of uninhibited innovation. Catherine intercepted us near the engineering department, tablet in hand. "The numbers from Q1 are in," she announced, her eyes sparkling. Our revenue had exceeded projections by 38%, while our operational costs had actually decreased thanks to improved efficiency and reduced turnover. Sarah Chen's quantum encryption team was in full swing, their workspace a hive of activity. They'd already filed 12 patent applications, each one representing a potential game-changer in cybersecurity. "We've been approached by 3 government agencies," Sarah reported proudly. "They're calling our technology revolutionary. Victoria watched all this with growing amazement. When I arrived, I expected to write about a corporate power struggle, she admitted. But this is something else entirely. You're not just running a company differently, you're redefining what corporate success looks like. Patricia appeared with more surprising news. Richard had been spotted having lunch with several other old-guard tech CEOs, all of whom were facing similar challenges from their boards and shareholders. They're calling it the housewife threat, she reported, barely containing her amusement. Apparently, they're worried about more women following your example. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The very term they'd used to dismiss us was becoming a symbol of progressive leadership and successful innovation. Linda Torres brought in a stack of new applications, many from highly qualified women who'd left the industry to raise families, and were now inspired to return. Mid-morning brought a conference call with international investors. They'd been skeptical of our methods at first, but the results were undeniable. Our stock price had stabilized at an all-time high. Our innovation pipeline was bursting with promising projects, and our employee satisfaction scores were setting new industry standards. Claire Davidson arrived for our scheduled strategy meeting, bringing news of more companies joining our coalition. We're not just changing policies, she explained, spreading out the latest membership applications. We're changing the conversation about what leadership looks like in the modern world. James Morton appeared with intelligence about Richard's latest moves. He's trying to gather support for a shareholders' meeting, he reported. Wants to challenge the legitimacy of your leadership. But his expression suggested this was more of an annoyance than a threat. Victoria, who had been quietly observing these interactions, pulled me aside. "You know what's fascinating?" she said. Everyone I've interviewed today has mentioned how your experience as a mother has influenced your leadership style. They're seeing it as an asset, not a liability. The afternoon brought a visit from the state's Secretary of Commerce, interested in studying our model for potential policy recommendations. As we toured the facility, we passed the newly opened childcare center, where Ollie had insisted on spending his after-school hours helping the little kids with their computer games. Sarah Chen's team chose that moment to demonstrate their latest breakthrough, gathering in the main conference room with palpable excitement. The presentation was interrupted by a commotion outside. Richard had arrived unannounced, demanding to speak with me. Instead of meeting him in private, I invited him to join the presentation. He sat stiffly in the back, watching as Sarah's team unveiled innovations that would have been impossible under his leadership. His expression shifted from skepticism to disbelief as the technical specifications scrolled across the screen. Victoria observed the scene with keen interest, no doubt already crafting the narrative for her article. But the real story wasn't in the technical achievements or the financial success. It was in the cultural transformation that had made it all possible. Later, reviewing the day's events with Catherine and Patricia, we received word that Richard's attempt to call a shareholders meeting had failed. The very investors he'd counted on for support were now our strongest advocates, having seen the tangible results of our new approach. As the office quieted for the evening, I found myself in the innovation lab, surrounded by the evidence of unleashed creativity. Whiteboards covered in complex algorithms, prototypes in various stages of development, and most importantly, the lingering energy of people truly engaged in their work. Marcus called, reminding me about Ollie's science fair tomorrow. He's presenting his project on how computers can help families, he reported. Says he got the idea from watching you transform Vertex. Driving home, I reflected on how Richard's attempt to diminish me had instead revealed the true power of bringing one's whole self to leadership. The skills I'd developed as a mother, patience, empathy, multitasking, crisis management, had proven invaluable in transforming a toxic corporate culture into a thriving community. Victoria's article would tell part of the story, but the real narrative was still unfolding. Every day brought new evidence that our approach wasn't just more humane, it was more successful. We were proving that compassionate leadership and business success weren't mutually exclusive, they were mutually reinforcing. The Housewife CEO label that had been meant to dismiss me had become a banner for change, inspiring others to challenge traditional notions of corporate leadership. And somewhere across town, Richard was learning that in the modern business world, underestimating someone based on their family status wasn't just prejudiced, it was bad business. The implications of Vertex's transformation rippled through the tech industry with increasing force. Early morning brought an unexpected email from Sofia Martinez, CEO of Global Innovations, requesting an urgent meeting. Her company had been struggling with similar challenges, and our success had caught her attention. Over breakfast at Seattle's iconic Space Needle restaurant, Sophia shared her own story of being underestimated and dismissed. When I saw what you did at Vertex, she admitted, stirring her coffee thoughtfully, I realized we've been approaching leadership all wrong. We've been trying to fit into a broken model instead of creating a better one. Catherine joined us midway through the meeting, bringing news that would reshape our strategy entirely. 3 major tech companies had approached us about forming a joint innovation initiative, specifically focused on supporting working parents in the industry. The proposed budget was staggering, over $200 million in initial funding. Back at Vertex, the morning buzz centered around Tech Future magazine's cover story. Victoria Chang's article had exceeded all expectations, painting a vivid picture of our company's transformation. The headline read, "The Mother of Innovation, How Family Values Are Revolutionizing Tech Leadership." Sarah Chen burst into my office, her usual composure replaced by barely contained excitement. The quantum encryption team had achieved another breakthrough, but this time it was different. We've found a way to make the technology accessible to small businesses, she explained, spreading diagrams across my desk. It could democratize cybersecurity completely. Patricia arrived with updates from our international offices. The cultural changes we'd implemented were having an even more dramatic impact overseas. Where traditional corporate hierarchies had been even more entrenched. Employee engagement scores had doubled in our Asian offices, and innovation metrics were soaring. Mid-morning brought a surprise visit from Andrew Porter. This time he came. Alone. No Richard in sight. I've been doing some soul-searching, he admitted, settling into a chair in my office. Tech Vanguard needs to change. Would you consider consulting with us on implementing similar policies? Linda Torres interrupted with pressing news from HR. The employee stock ownership program had exceeded all expectations, with 97% participation. More significantly, it had sparked a wave of long-term thinking among employees, who now saw themselves as true stakeholders in the company's future. A text from Marcus made me smile. Ollie's teacher called. He's been teaching his classmates about inclusive leadership during recess. Says every good team needs different kinds of thinking. My son was absorbing lessons I hadn't even realized. I was teaching. The afternoon brought a meeting with Claire Davidson and our growing coalition of family-friendly tech companies. What had started as a small group had evolved into a powerful force for industry change. We were drafting guidelines that could become the standard for corporate culture in the digital age. James Morton appeared with the latest intelligence on Richard's activities. He'd been spotted meeting with old guard investors, but his arguments were falling on increasingly deaf ears. Our success had become impossible to ignore or dismiss. Victoria Chang called with follow-up questions for a deeper piece she was writing about the broader implications of our approach. "It's not just about work-life balance anymore," she observed. "You're showing that traditional family values, empathy, nurturing, collaboration, are actually crucial for innovation." Sarah Chen's team chose that moment to demonstrate their latest project, a mentoring platform that would allow experienced professionals to coach promising talents while working flexible hours. It was the perfect embodiment of our values, combining technical innovation with human connection. The day took an unexpected turn when a group of engineering students from the local university arrived for a scheduled tour. They'd been studying our management model as part of their professional ethics course. Their questions revealed how deeply our story had resonated with the next generation of tech leaders. Late afternoon brought news that would cement our position in the industry. The National Association of Technology Companies had selected Vertex as their Company of the Year, specifically citing our innovative approach to leadership and corporate culture. Patricia delivered another piece of satisfying news. Richard's last remaining allies on the board had officially withdrawn their opposition to our initiatives. The old guard's resistance had finally crumbled in the face of undeniable success. As evening approached, I received an unexpected request. The governor's office wanted me to chair a commission on modernizing corporate governance standards. They saw Vertex as a model for balancing profit with social responsibility. Driving home, I reflected on how our transformation had sparked a larger conversation about the role of business in society. We weren't just changing one company, we were challenging fundamental assumptions about leadership, success, and the false dichotomy between professional achievement and personal fulfillment. Marcus greeted me with news that Ollie had created a business presentation for his show and tell, complete with hand-drawn graphs showing how happy workers make better computers. His innocent interpretation of our work captured its essence perfectly. The evening brought a final email from Catherine. Our stock had reached another record high, but more importantly, other companies following our lead were seeing similar results. The market was speaking clearly. Compassionate, inclusive leadership wasn't just morally right, it was financially smart. Looking out over Seattle's twinkling skyline from my home office, I thought about all the other underestimated people watching our story unfold. Somewhere out there, another dismissed housewife was plotting her own revolution, armed with the knowledge that being underestimated could be the greatest advantage of all. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight I could savor the knowledge that we'd proven something vital. The future of business would be built not on dominance and control, but on understanding and empowerment. And it had taken someone who'd been dismissed as just a housewife to show the way. Morning sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Vertex Technologies as I prepared for a pivotal board meeting. Today would mark the final stage of our company's transformation. With initiatives that would cement our position as industry leaders in both innovation and workplace culture. An urgent message from Catherine drew my attention. She'd uncovered something remarkable in her latest market analysis. Companies that had adopted our family-friendly policies were showing an average 45% increase in patent applications. The correlation between inclusive leadership and innovation was becoming undeniable. Sarah Chen intercepted me. On my way to the conference room, her eyes bright with possibility. Her team had finished integrating the quantum encryption technology with our accessibility initiative. "We've created something unprecedented," she explained, pulling up the test results. "Enterprise-level security that small businesses can actually afford and implement." Linda Torres arrived with fascinating recruitment data. The talent pool had expanded in unexpected ways. Experienced professionals who'd stepped away from tech to raise families were returning, bringing unique perspectives and skills. Their diverse experiences were driving innovation in ways traditional hiring never could. The atmosphere in the boardroom crackled with anticipation. James Morton opened the meeting with a comprehensive review of our quarterly performance. The numbers told a compelling story. Revenue up 60%, employee turnover down to industry-leading lows, and our stock price reflecting the market's confidence in our vision. Patricia distributed tablets containing our latest initiative, a comprehensive program to support employees pursuing both career advancement and family life. The proposal included flexible work arrangements, mentorship opportunities, and innovative childcare solutions that would set new standards for the industry. Claire Davidson joined virtually, representing our growing coalition of progressive tech companies. The movement we'd started had gained unstoppable momentum. Traditional corporations were finding themselves forced to adapt or risk losing their best talent to more family-friendly competitors. A message from Marcus provided a perfect real-world example of our impact. Ollie's school had implemented a new STEM program inspired by our success, emphasizing collaborative problem-solving and inclusive leadership from an early age. The next generation was already learning the lessons we'd fought so hard to establish. Victoria Chang's latest article had sparked intense discussion across the industry. She'd coined a new term, maternal innovation management, to describe our approach. The concept resonated deeply, challenging traditional assumptions about leadership qualities and their origins. Andrew Porter's team from Tech Vanguard arrived for our scheduled collaboration meeting. The company that had once planned to acquire us was now eagerly learning from our example. Their presence in our offices symbolized a broader shift in corporate thinking. Sarah Chen's latest presentation demonstrated how our cultural changes had accelerated technical innovation. Teams were solving problems faster, thinking more creatively, and producing more robust solutions than ever before. The freedom to work flexibly had actually increased productivity. Mid-afternoon brought news that would reshape the entire tech landscape. 3 major venture capital firms had established funds specifically targeting companies with diverse leadership and family-friendly policies. Our success had created a new investment criterion. Richard's absence from recent industry events spoke volumes. His old guard allies had dwindled to a handful of holdouts, still clinging to outdated notions of corporate hierarchy. Their resistance had become little more than a footnote in the story of industry transformation. A surprise visit from the Secretary of Labor underscored the national implications of our work. She was interested in studying our policies as a potential model for federal workplace guidelines. What had started as one company's revolution was evolving into national policy discussions. Linda Torres shared analytics from our employee support programs. The data revealed something remarkable. Parents in leadership positions were consistently rated higher in crisis management, team building, and strategic planning. Their family experiences translated directly into valuable leadership skills. Catherine's financial projections for the next quarter exceeded all expectations. Our approach wasn't just sustainable, it was setting new benchmarks for corporate success. The market had embraced our vision of compassionate capitalism. Patricia brought word of another unexpected development. Several top business schools had added case studies about Vertex to their curriculum. Our story was shaping how future leaders would think about corporate governance and success. The afternoon light softened as I reviewed proposals for our next phase of innovation. Each document represented a piece of the future we were building, a future where success wasn't measured solely in profits, but in the positive impact we created for our employees and society. A video call with our international teams revealed how our influence had spread globally. Offices in Tokyo, London, and Singapore had adapted our policies to their local contexts, creating a worldwide network of progressive workplaces. As evening approached, Claire Davidson shared exciting news about our coalition's growth. Major tech companies were now competing to join, eager to be part of the movement we'd started. The transformation had reached a tipping point. The day's final meeting involved reviewing applications for our new innovation incubator. We'd created a program specifically for parent entrepreneurs, providing resources and support to turn their unique perspectives into viable businesses. Driving home, I reflected on how far we'd come from that moment when Richard dismissed me as just a housewife. His attempt to diminish me had instead revealed the tremendous value of experiences gained outside traditional corporate paths. Marcus greeted me with news that would perfectly bookend the day. Ollie's class had voted him Most Innovative Leader for his project on making technology more accessible to families. His innocent wisdom reflected everything we'd been fighting to prove. The evening sky painted Seattle in soft purples and golds as I sat in my home office, reviewing one last proposal. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight I could appreciate how thoroughly we'd changed the conversation about leadership, success, and the true meaning of innovation. The final chapter of Vertex Technologies' transformation unfolded in ways none of us could have predicted. Standing at the podium of the National Tech Leadership Summit, I gazed out at a sea of faces, CEOs, entrepreneurs, innovators, all gathered, to hear about the revolution that began with a dismissive comment and ended in industry-wide change. Catherine sat in the front row, beaming with pride as I shared our latest achievements. Our model had been adopted by over 200 companies worldwide, creating a ripple effect that transformed countless lives. The quantum encryption technology developed under Sarah Chen's leadership had become the industry standard, protecting millions of businesses while remaining accessible to all. Linda Torres had just finished presenting our comprehensive data on the impact of inclusive leadership. The numbers were staggering. Companies that embraced our family-friendly policies showed an average 70% increase in innovation output while maintaining significantly higher employee retention rates than their traditional counterparts. Patricia caught my eye from the side of the stage, giving me a subtle thumbs up. She'd been instrumental in documenting our journey, creating a blueprint that other companies could follow. Her detailed analysis of our transformation had become required reading at leading business schools. Claire Davidson's coalition had grown into a global movement, with member companies representing over $1 trillion in market capitalization. What began as a small group of forward-thinking leaders had evolved into a powerful force for change in the corporate world. James Morton, now a vocal advocate for progressive leadership, shared how our success had influenced even the most traditional boards of directors. The old guard's resistance had crumbled in the face of undeniable results. Profit, innovation, and human dignity could coexist and reinforce each other. Sarah Chen's latest breakthrough garnered international attention. Her team had developed an artificial intelligence system that incorporated emotional intelligence and empathy, qualities she attributed to our inclusive workplace culture. The technology promised to revolutionize human-computer interaction while reflecting our values. Victoria Chang's documentary about our journey premiered at a major film festival, capturing the attention of audiences beyond the tech world. The story resonated with people from all walks of life, challenging fundamental assumptions about leadership and success. Andrew Porter, once our potential acquirer, had become one of our strongest allies. Tech Vanguard's transformation under his leadership proved that even the most traditional companies could evolve. His presence at the summit symbolized the industry's broader acceptance of our principles. The Secretary of Labor announced groundbreaking legislation inspired by our policies. The Family Innovation Act would provide incentives for companies adopting family-friendly workplace practices, potentially affecting millions of working parents across the country. Richard's absence from the summit spoke volumes. His attempt to undermine our success had faded into irrelevance as the industry embraced change. The term "just a housewife" had been reclaimed as a symbol of untapped potential and innovative thinking. Marcus squeezed my hand as I concluded my keynote address. Ollie, now proudly wearing his Future Innovator badge from the summit's youth program, had just finished presenting his own ideas about technology and family life to a group of impressed executives. Linda Torres shared the results of our latest employee survey. The data revealed something remarkable. Vertex had become the most sought-after employer in the tech industry, with potential candidates valuing our culture even above compensation. Catherine's financial report for the year exceeded all projections. Our stock price had tripled, but more importantly, our success had proven that compassionate leadership could drive extraordinary business results. The market had spoken decisively in favor of our approach. Claire Davidson announced the establishment of a global institute dedicated to studying and promoting inclusive leadership practices. The research facility, housed at a prestigious university, would ensure that our innovations in corporate culture continued to evolve and spread. Sarah Chen's team unveiled their most ambitious project yet, a platform that would make advanced technology accessible to underserved communities worldwide. The initiative embodied everything we stood for: innovation driven by empathy and understanding. Patricia compiled our journey into a comprehensive case study, documenting every step of our transformation. The resulting publication became an instant bestseller, inspiring a new generation of leaders to challenge traditional corporate paradigms. As the summit drew to a close, I reflected on the true meaning of our success. We hadn't just proven that a housewife could run a major tech company. We'd demonstrated that the very qualities society often dismisses as feminine or domestic were actually crucial for innovation and leadership. The evening concluded with an unexpected announcement. The tech industry's most prestigious innovation award, historically dominated by traditional companies, had been awarded to Vertex Technologies. The citation praised not just our technical achievements, but our fundamental reimagining of corporate culture. Standing there, holding the award while cameras flashed, I thought about that pivotal board meeting when Richard had tried to dismiss me. His words, meant to diminish, had instead sparked a revolution that transformed not just one company, but an entire industry. The summit's final session focused on the future. Our success had created a new paradigm, where leadership was measured, not by hours worked or hierarchies maintained, but by the positive impact created for employees, families, and society. Walking off stage, surrounded by the next generation of tech leaders eager to learn from our example, I felt a profound sense of completion. We had proven that true innovation comes not from conforming to traditional corporate cultures, but from bringing our whole selves, including our experiences as parents and caregivers, to the table. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.